So today we're going to do a timing belt and water pump on this 2013 Acura RDX. It's a 3.5. I've done a video on another Acura model with the same engine. This one's a little bit different. I noticed it doesn't have a power steering pump in the way, which is fortunate. So first we're going to scan this thing and make sure there's no pre-existing conditions with the engine controls. The check engine light is on, but that doesn't mean there isn't a pre-existing condition. So I've loaded the vehicle from history. I'm going to activate it. And we're just going to do a network scan. I got the ignition on, engine not running. I don't want to get the engine hot to work on it. I don't suspect there's any issues, but it's always good to know before going into an engine for any kind of significant repairs, and I would consider a timing belt repair fairly significant, to see if there's any pre-existing codes. It would suck afterwards having a check engine light on and a fault code and wondering if this is something new or something that was pre-existing. So taking a couple minutes proactively and doing this, I think, is a good idea. As I said, I don't expect there to be any codes. No, there's no codes in the engine transmission. So we'll pick up when it's finished scanning this network. So after about 2 minutes, the scanner has scanned 22 controllers. There's some TPMS codes. I suspect he's had winter tires without sensors on it. It's got summer wheels on it now, so I'm not going to be too concerned about that. Low battery voltage and electric power steering. That's why there's no power steering pump. Tailgate closure unit. Nice to know. Body code for the tailgate closure unit. I'm not sure if there's something going on with that. I'll ask him. Power control unit. Error code. Well, while we're here, we'll do a network code clear, and then we'll start this job. Clear all codes, read by code scan. Key on, engine off, which is what we are. So at least we're going to start out with a clean slate. I'll pick up when this is done. So we've done a network code clear, cleared codes out of 21 controllers. So we'll proceed with the timing belt disassembly. So raise the vehicle on a suitable lift, remove the right front wheel assembly, because we're going to have to remove this inner piece of plastic here. While you're here, you might as well have a look at the brakes. And this has got lots of brake pad on the front. The rotors look pretty good. There's about 8 millimeters of brake pad on inboard and outside. Not too good on the tires though. Tires are pretty much done. So I'm going to tell him he should buy new tires. Anyways, we're going to go ahead and remove this plastic trim so we can gain access to the bottom of the engine. So remove the 3 plastic push pins that hold the inner fender plastic in this area here, here, and on the bottom. Now I'm just going to bend this down out of the way. It's pretty flexible. To remove this whole entire plastic, you got to take another 15 or 18 of these push pins out, and some of them don't live. So I'm going to just move it out of the way because we just need access to this pulley, the harmonic balancer here, and the bottom cover, and that's about it. Disconnect the negative battery post. Another reason why you would want to do a pre-scan prior to doing this, if you disconnect the battery cable, which is a good idea for this job, you're going to lose any information that would have been recorded. Remove the plastic cover off of the ECM and set it off to the side. We're going to have to disconnect the ECM to get it out of the way. We need to support the top of this engine by this lift hook because we need to take this front motor mount off down here, and that's nothing. You could also support it from the bottom, but I like to be able to raise and lower the vehicle on the hoist so it's easier for me to work on it. So I'll pick up when I've got the computer out of the way, and I'll set up the lift mechanism or the holding fixture. So remove the 2 plastic pieces that are clipped on both sides of the fender, install the fixture across the shock towers and the brace to the front. Now there's a little mount right here, so this pipe fits right over top of it perfectly, and you're sitting on the radiator support. And then the lift eye goes in here. At least Honda's or Acura's nice enough to provide us with one and not having to figure configure something. I've got the computer removed. The 3 connectors are keyed so you can't mix them up, and a bunch of clips removed, and the harness removed from the PCM bracket. So we're ready to remove the motor mount. So remove the front engine bracket. Remove the coolant reservoir has to be pulled off. It just slides out of the bracket. Then there are 3 retaining bolts with 17 mil heads and 2 14 mil heads, and then the engine mount can be removed and set off to the side, and that gives us a lot more room. Nice that this one doesn't have power steering in the way, so we don't have to deal with that. So the upper sections of these timing covers need to be removed. There's 5 bolts, 3 across the bottom and 2 on the top. They have shoulders on them. They're all the same, so you don't need to worry about mixing them up as far as I can tell. The back cover is the same. So now that we have both top covers out of the way, we're going to go ahead and raise the vehicle and remove the bottom cover, the timing or serpentine belt, and this engine bracket that goes on the front. But you have to take the bottom cover off and the serpentine belt off. I might as well do that from the top here with the serpentine belt tool. So you need a serpentine belt tool with a 14 mil socket, or you could use a combination wrench and remove the tensioner by lifting up on it down here and take the serpentine belt off. Now if you're intending to reuse the belt, it's a good idea to put it back on in the same orientation, so mark the outside of it so it's turning the same way, but I am replacing the belt. So there are several commercially available holding fixtures, but I have a homemade one which is a big hydraulic fitting welded to an old 1.5 inch wrench I found on the road. You need to hold the crankshaft pulley while you remove the bolt with a power bar. It's pretty tight and it's Loctited. Sometimes if you put a little heat on it with propane torch on the bolt and let it release the Loctite, it'll come out easier, but this usually works. Fortunately, the pulley just slides off. Be careful not to drop the key if it comes out, and don't lose the slinger behind it. You'll see that in a minute. So there are 7 bolts on the lower cover, and now once the cover is off, we can get in here to the timing belt. Now first thing we got to do is position the engine to TDC. Here's that slinger I mentioned, and it has to go on in the correct orientation. It's got a chamfer, so it has to go on that way. I'm going to set that on top of the harmonic balancer so I don't forget it. And we need to rotate the engine till the timing mark is lined up. So I'm looking for the timing mark on the crank sprocket here. I don't see it. Maybe it's back here. Maybe it's back here on that cover. Usually it's right where the key is. Oh, there it is. Right there. That little dot right there. I'm going to mark it with white paint, and it's got to be lined up to this rib on the engine cover, oil pump cover, housing cover, whatever you want to call this. So I'm going to mark it with some white paint, make it easier to see, and we're going to turn the engine clockwise to line up the mark. It's not recommended to turn the engine backwards. So I put the harmonic balancer bolt back in with a spacer and tightened it up and rotated the engine until the timing mark, as you can see here, is lined up with the rib on the cover. Now we have to check the timing marks on the camshaft. If we're lucky, they're lined up. If we're not, it's out 360 degrees and we have to turn it one more turn. So this is the way I like to be able to raise and lower it. I don't think I'm going to have to remove this guard here. There should be enough room to slide this belt off the crank pulley, and there's the belt tensioner. Looking at how far extended it is, it's pretty extended. This thing had a noise in it on a cold start, like a rattling sound. I suspect it was the timing belt rubbing against the covers. I didn't look for evidence of that though. So there's the front pulley. I'll try to get in here with the camera so you can see this. You can see the timing mark is lined up. I put some white paint on it, and there's the back pulley. So you can see the timing mark is lined up on that one as well. So we're good to go. We just need to remove this upper engine mount, and then the belt tensioner idler, and the belt should come off. So there's the motor mount brace or bracket removed. This is the actual water pump here. There are 3 14 millimeter headed bolts and 1 little 10 mil bolt holding this wiring harness plastic on. And like I said, we can remove this bottom pivot here. Right now the tensioner pivot, and that will release the belt and it should come off. Hopefully the camshafts don't turn. So there's the belt out. If you were intending to reuse the belt, because let's say you were changing the water pump and reusing the belt, it is recommended to mark it so that it goes back on in the same orientation, but we are replacing this because it's due. So we got to remove the belt tensioner assembly down there, the hydraulic tensioner right down here, and that's going to be a new one that comes in the kit. And we're going to replace the water pump while we're here. So that's the next step, is to remove the water pump bolts. So this is the part number from Gates for the timing belt water pump kit. It comes with a new water pump, as you can see, gasket for the water pump obviously, idler wheel, tensioner wheel, and a tensioner assembly. So we don't have to worry about resetting that tensioner. This one's already caged. Even comes with instructions in the bottom of it. It says, what do we got in here? Oh, that's a gauge for the tensioner, I believe. But we'll have a look. We're going to go ahead and remove the water pump now. So it looks like there are 5 6mm bolts that hold the water pump on, including plus the 3 motor mount bolts. Once those are removed, you can pull the water pump off and drain the coolant from the system. I just put a big catch can underneath and catch it, and then I'll rinse it all off after. So we got to clean up the gasket surface and put the water pump, the new water pump, on, and then basically reverse the steps to install everything. I got the gasket surface cleaned off on the engine. The new water pump here with a new seal installed, little dielectric grease on the seal, and we're ready to put the water pump back on. So there's the water pump reinstalled. All the 6mm bolts on the front of this engine are torqued to 9 foot-pounds, including the cover bolts, and all the 10mm bolts are 33 foot-pounds. I like to use a little tiny bit of Loctite on any bolt that goes into a rotating device such as this tensioner or the motor mounts, not the motor mount, but the tensioner assembly pivot. So we're ready to reinstall the timing belt now. We want to take up all the slack on the drive side of the belt and have the looseness on this side. So there's the timing belt installed, the marks lined up. See the front mark there, the rear mark there, and the crank is lined up. Turn the engine a couple of revolutions after you pull the tensioner pin. Make sure the marks line up again. Now we can put the engine support mount on, and the lower cover, and then the upper covers. So the torque on this balancer bolt is 48 foot-pounds, then 60 degrees, which would be 1 flat. So I've tightened it to 48 foot-pounds, and I've marked where the point is. I'm going to turn it till the next one's lined up. So I've turned it 60 degrees until the next point lines up to my mark on the wrench. And we're good to put the serpentine belt on, the upper covers, and finish reassembly. So we're doing the crankshaft relearn, which is recommended after doing the timing belt. But it has to be above 167 Fahrenheit, so it's telling us to warm up the engine. Okay, wide open throttle. Release, turn it off. Start it. Wait 30 seconds. So I mentioned that this RDX had a rattle in the engine when it was on a cold start for about a minute and a half. And I noticed this timing belt tensioner has lost a little bit of oil. There was no oil other than this around the tensioner, so maybe it's lost some of the dampening oil in here. It doesn't feel bad, but of course we put a new one in. Well, it's nice and quiet and smooth right now. Just got back from a road test. So we'll have to start it cold, or I'll have the customer inform me whether or not it's still got that rattle in it. And I'll post a follow-up as to whether the rattle is now gone. So that's a wrap. Thanks for watching.